And I'm Simon Rosenberg from NDN, and before I get into this wonderful and esteemed panel, I just want to also just mention that tomorrow in this same room from 11 to 2, we're going to be having 8 wonderful, actually 9 now, 9 wonderful speakers from Cory Booker to Gavin Newsom to Arianna Huffington to Ray Ramsey. It's really a feast, a movable feast of big ideas and interesting people, and we'll feed you as well from 11 to 2. So if you'd like to come back, we'd love to have you here in this venue tomorrow. This event, for those of you who don't know NDN, we are a think tank and advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. We've been a little bit involved in explaining and promoting and nurturing and enabling and being run over by this new internet politics that has become so critical to the left of center politics in the country. And we wanted to, at this convention, in a time where Senator Obama has taken the original model really pioneered by Howard Dean and Joe Trippi back in 2003, really taken it to a whole another level. And this has become so definitional and so defining now for how people in the progressive and democratic worlds think about how they organize what an advocacy campaign or a political campaign, that we really are in this new era of people-based, people-led politics. And you can see it throughout this convention. I was at the Big Tent earlier today, and for those of you who haven't been over there, it is, what a sight. I mean, it's really, Kitty Kirk was in there. I mean, we've really seen this explosion of new voices and new people into the political system. It's very exciting, because I think at the end of the day, you can say this is doing a lot of different things, but what it's doing is that it's bringing average, everyday people much closer into politics, into the great debate that is our country. I think we're in the process of helping renew our democracy for a new day, and so I think this is wonderfully exciting. We've got a great panel for you, and we're going to get right to it. Let me introduce everybody, and then we'll just start with Mr. Trippi. I'm not going to introduce Joe Trippi. He doesn't really need much of an introduction. He's been my very dear friend now, and probably taught me more about politics than just about anybody I know, and I think many of us can say that in recent years. Joe really was the visionary who helped reimagine what a political campaign could look like and be in the 21st century, and we're going to hear from him in 1 minute. Following Joe is Macon Phillips. Joe Rospers, for those of you who don't know what Joe looks like, he does have a beard.
He's like a little bit smaller.
Joe was called away because he actually does have a day job as Director of New Media for the Obama campaign, but we have Macon is the Deputy Director, number 2, under Joe, and will be filling in for him very ably. And prior to joining the Obama campaign in May of 2008, he spent 3 years at Blue State Digital, a leading, I would not to say Washington-based, but a leading consulting firm specializing in online organizing, communications, and fundraising. And as Director of Blue State Digital Strategy Practice, Macon helped develop online programs for clients like Ted Kennedy, the DNC, Walmart Watch, and the CWA. So Macon, welcome. Thank you very much. And then finally, batting cleanup is an old friend also, Peter Greenberger, who's Director of Google's Politics and Issue Advocacy. And he's going to be talking a little bit and showing us a little presentation on how campaigns in 2008 are using the internet to target voters. Peter joined Google in 2007 to build and manage a new elections and issue advocacy sales team dedicated to introducing Google solutions to political campaigns, committees, and issue advocacy groups. Peter's also a long-time experienced political operative on the Democratic and progressive side. It's a great group. And to reflect on this great change in politics, I want to welcome and start my good friend Joe Trippi. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. Thank you. I've said this a few times now, but I really think the Dean campaign was just sort of the Wright brothers of this stuff. I mean, they were, basically proving that with a rubber band and some rickety Scotch tape and some glue could put together, the first sort of different kind of campaign, proved you could get off the ground with it, but for a lot of different reasons, the maturity of the technology just wasn't able to do what you can do 4 years later. With YouTube, we didn't have YouTube. We created Dean TV, which was which Ross Bars and a lot of the people in the Dean campaign helped to do. But Dean TV was 24 hours, 7 days a week. People could put up their own video. you know, of why they were for Dean, music mashes, back when the press didn't know what, thought a mashup was potatoes or something. But I mean, basically you look back on it, it was YouTube before there was YouTube, but we had 190,000 people who actually watched it, not millions of people who, with YouTube. As you sort of look at what's happened with MySpace, Facebook, Google Maps that wasn't there. I mean, just all these new technologies and tools that weren't there in 2004, and so what you get is, and also didn't have as many millions who were taking part in the community. One example of 1.4 million blogs when Dean was around, I mean the Dean campaign, something over 77, 80 million blogs today. I mean, just as an example of how big things changed. Not necessarily that the blogosphere is coherent or anything, but just how massive that movement got over just 4 years. And so what's happened, I think, is, look, somehow you look up 4 years later and you're sitting here, if you're me, and it's like, I've said this too, it's like a biplane aviator watching astronauts walk to the launch pad. I mean, these guys have literally skipped Gemini and Mercury and Gemini and have built the Apollo project. We're going to find out if you can launch a guy safely and have him land in the White House. But I also think the other thing, important, instructive thing, is what this can't do. I mean, there's still, and we're here today, and despite millions of people, and by the way, all of this is great for democracy and getting people to participate, but there's still the politics, of negative campaigning, of negative spots that are going to pound away on the Obama campaign, and the real politic of television is still very powerful. It's not, it's not like 1960. We're close to 1960 when people heard the debate between Nixon and Kennedy and thought Nixon had won, and saw it on TV and thought Kennedy had won, and you started seeing TV take its power, really take over. We're not quite there yet. We're still at this envelope where obviously new media, social networks, the ability for better target to get people together, the new tools are they're just moving exponentially, that I believe, in a very short 4 years, 8 years, we'll be looking at what's happening today and laughing at the Obama campaign as being, how sort of what we were thinking back then, that was the most amazing thing we'd ever seen. It's going to be even bigger. But TV is still going to have a big impact on this election, and those attack ads are still going to have a big impact. And, if anybody says at the end of this, how did the internet let down the Obama campaign? I mean, I'm just going to go shoot myself, because, I mean, that's what they did at the end of the Dean campaign. How the internet, how those cost, how come they couldn't get Dean elected? I mean, come on, we're still, the one thing, and then I'll shut up, the one thing too, let me tell you, we're still talking about ridiculous numbers. There are 300 million Americans. We're all jumping up and down because the Obama campaign has gotten 2 million of them to donate, or and probably more to become much more active. But 60 million voted for Bush, 57 million voted for Kerry. You can't tell me that 5 million of the Kerry people wouldn't have gotten involved, wouldn't have contributed $100 to his campaign. I mean, that we're talking about less than 10% of the people who voted for him. So we're still talking. The people who have gotten active and are doing these things is still just a small number. It's going to continue to grow, and James Carville used to say it's the economy stupid. It's the network stupid, and the network's getting very, very big, and it's going to continue to get bigger.
Thanks, Joe. Megan.
Well, so thank you for having me here, and I send Joe's apologies. I showed up here, and Joe accused me of not being the big man, and that's a first for me. But echoing on what Joe was saying, I think the success of our online operation has very little to do with technology, very little to do with that, and I think it has more to do with three important reasons. First, Barack Obama himself. The fact that he really connects with people, whether it's through TV or the internet or in person or what have you. He gives people this energy to go do something. And I don't think that's really disputed. The second piece is right now in this country, people are desperate for change. They are tired of the last 8 years, and frankly, it's fairly easy if you put the right thing in front of them to get them to do something they think will help them change the way things are. And the third, and this is to me the most important, is that we as campaign staff are all incredibly lucky to work for a campaign that is for a community organizer, for a guy who understands, maybe not as much the technology as I do, but understands the principles of what we do better than really anybody else in the campaign, and has been a great leader for that. And I think you see it throughout all the different ways that we organize people, very outcome-oriented and very much trying to give them the tools to affect their own change. So when you think about that, just understand that this moment has a lot more to do than just technology, and we're very lucky to be there to organize around it. And how we think about organizing, we sort of approach, at least as the new media department, opportunities and projects with three major things in mind: message, money, and mobilization. We're thinking about how our activities can be evaluated against these three criteria. And I can talk about a couple examples, but just to understand that driving message to the internet speaks a little bit to what Joe pointed out, is that there will always be negative campaigning, or perhaps it'll go away one day, but it's very much a part of the problem now. And we have projects that are focused on message, such as Fight the Smears, other ways to give people tools to push back on really nasty things that are floating around out there, and my hunch is it's going to get much worse. We're very much focused on developing those networks to have friends and family members and community leaders have the information they need to push back in areas that are subject to this negative campaigning. Just getting over being a little sick, so apologize for that. Money-wise, we have actually just finished a fundraising program called Backstage with Barack, which is when we asked our email list, asked our online supporters just to make a donation and tell us a little bit about themselves. And we got a huge response, went through and read every story. We have systems that allow us to go through and review all these people's comments, and actually brought 10 people out here and gave them sort of an incentive, but also gave them a sense that they are the most important part of this campaign, and they're going to meet with Barack actually on Thursday before his speech. One of the guys that we found actually served with John McCain in Vietnam, and as such was available to the folks in North Carolina to talk about his experience there. And so we're seeing fundraising programs morph over into the message side, and really creating a program that's useful to a lot of different parts of the campaign. And then also to Joe's point about the numbers here, because it's very intimidating math. We have a significant number of supporters, but it's not the size of the electorate. And what is critical is giving each one of those members of our online community the tools to organize in their own community. For example, we have over 100,000 events that have been organized in the last 19 months or so. And the average attendee is around 5 to 10 folks, depending on the type of events. And when you do the math there, you can start to think about how people are taking the content, taking the action from our online program and transferring it into offline action that has real impact on their local communities. And sort of one of the interesting projects we recently wrapped up, and actually was shown at the convention yesterday, was the platform creation process. And there's a guy at the campaign, Jeff Berman, who came to us a few months ago actually, and asked us to help add a little bit more transparency, a little bit more involvement to the platform creation process. And so we created thousands of online events just by sort of telling our supporters that there's this opportunity to host a listening party in their community. We actually sent videographers out to some of these just to get a sense for the color and the flavor of what was going on. And one of the guys interviewed in Atlanta actually kind of summed it up for me when he talked about how it wasn't just the product of these meetings, that it was the process, that it was actually having people come to somebody's house and talk about issues that mattered to them. And from that, Jeff and this guy, Michael Oyaki, put together a platform, I think, that reflects a lot of the input that came from those parties, and we very much consider that a success of the program. And one last point I'll make. I'm from Alabama originally, and I was trying to think of like a little personal anecdote to give you a sense of, to me, what this means. I went into MyBo, our online community site, and searched for my hometown, Huntsville, Alabama, and there's a group there that's organizing. And that state's not going to be competitive for us. I mean, maybe it will be if things turn significantly, but right now they are very useful for Georgia. They're very useful for organizing in their community, but they're also organizing Democrats to support down ballot races. They're talking about the issues. They're hosting their own listening party. They're doing things in places that we need to be competitive in. And so this online program is taking advantage of a moment. It's using some technology, sure, but it's trying to give people tools to affect change in their own community, and I think that's the key to our success.
You know, Macon, one of the things, I worked in the war room in 1992, and, you know, one of the things I think that you guys have helped us understand is that in the 20th century, when you thought of a presidential campaign in your mind's eye, you thought of a 30-second spot and a tarmac hit, you know, by a candidate at an airport, and 200 kids in a headquarters going to work every day. That was sort of the visualization of what a campaign was. And, you know, and what I like to, you know, the way we like to think about it is that now it's really about 10 or 15 million people going to work every day, wired into the campaign through all the ways that you have it, traditional and new, working as partners in the fight every day. That's a better model, right? And one of the things that's been so exciting, and maybe in the Q&A you can talk a little bit about, or even now, if you just, before you go, before we pass on to Peter, just talk a little bit about mybarackobama.com, because I'm not sure that everybody here really understands the significance of what that is. If you could just talk about that a little bit.
So along the lines of the 3 M's, the message, money, and mobilization, My Barack Obama is a suite of tools that anyone can use. You set up an account, you can create your own blog where you can write about whatever you want to write about. So that's the message part, I guess, at least in terms of a very personal venue for that. And there's a lot of folks that are connecting with one another and finding shared interests and joining groups. Everything from, you know, people who like certain type of music and support Obama, to people who have certain skill sets and support Obama, to a whole variety of groups. We have fundraising piece of this, which is the personal fundraising pages. Sort of like the Bush Rangers from a while back, but very different in the sense that they're small dollar donors who are bundling contributions to support Obama. And we have the voter contact part of this, which is everything from making phone calls to organizing canvasses through events. That sort of technology.
Thank you. Peter, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. As Simon mentioned, before joining Google, I worked in Democratic politics for about a dozen years, most recently as a campaign manager for a United States Senate race in Oklahoma in 2004. But that year, earlier that year, I also worked on a presidential race, and though Simon cautioned me not to mention his name in this crowd, he was a Democrat in 2004, and I'm afraid I might see him next week.
You don't have to mention it.
But what Macon mentioned on safer territory, what Macon mentioned a few times, money, message, and mobilization, I think prove that the fundamentals of campaigns have stayed the same. It's the tools and the way that we're interacting and networking with volunteers and with activists that have changed. So what I wanted to do today was walk you through a few of the tools that the campaigns and other political advertisers are using working with Google, which is all fairly new. We have not had this team before. We have an auto team, a finance team, a healthcare team, an entertainment team, but this is the first time we've had a political team. So a group of people at Google dedicated to working with you, with candidates, with campaigns, with committees, with issue groups, to help you better use Google. So, if you'll allow me. And Joe mentioned, too, the continuing importance of television, which, of course, nobody can dispute. However, the way that people consume media today has absolutely changed. And in fact, the average American consumer now watches about 14 hours of TV a week and spends about the same amount of time online. And in many cases, they're doing both things simultaneously. And you can see by this graphic, a lesser amount of time listening to the radio or reading the paper or reading magazines. The internet really is becoming a larger part of the way that we all get our news and information. Campaign budgets, campaign attention, I think it's starting to turn a little bit more in the direction of the internet, but we think there's still a way to go. This is the same, of course, with political news and information. So we pulled a few stats here to give you a sense of the numbers of people who are now going online to find political information. There was a Pew study, too, a few weeks ago. I think that set a record 46 or 49% of voters, registered voters, had gone online to find information about the election this cycle. And that was a dramatic increase from 2006 and from 2004. So we know they're going online. We know that they're looking for political information. How can campaigns and other political advertisers reach these interested potential voters? A few different ways, and these align pretty well with what Macon was talking about. Raising money, defining your candidate, that's maybe the fourth M, or message, media. Persuade undecided voters, expanding the electorate, so mobilization, and then I'll throw in a fourth or fifth M, measuring your success, trying to make this advertising more accountable, more transparent, and hopefully with the end result being you can refine your campaign and improve it in real time instead of after the fact. Raising money, I think, is not a huge surprise, and in fact, sometimes we belabor it. The internet should not be seen as an ATM. However, as we've of course seen from the Barack Obama campaign, as well as from the John McCain campaign, they've been able to raise a tremendous amount of money over the internet. And the McCain campaign publicly has said they bring $3 or $4 in return for every dollar they spend online. I'm not sure what the Obama figure is or if Macon will divulge it, but we're hoping that they're seeing equally successful results. Now, this hopefully is a familiar looking screen grab for most people here. Are people generally familiar with Google? Take that as a yes. This is a typical search page, and what I decided to do a couple days ago, like many of my fellow Americans, was to conduct a search on Senator Joe Biden. And what I discovered was if you look at the organic search, utilize all the technology, you see Wikipedia, which always appears very strongly on Google. You see the senator's official homepage, his Senate homepage. And you see, well, here you go, the Barack Obama campaign. But in order to reach people at the very moment that they're looking at the very top of the page, very cleverly, the Barack Obama campaign purchased this search ad. And so what we call this, it's AdWords, it's search advertising on our platform. They're paying a cost per click model. So when you click on this ad, they are paying to get your traffic to their site. You'll also notice on the right-hand side, the John McCain campaign was ready, and they put up their own ad about Senator Biden and trying to direct traffic towards that site. Some people are not actively searching, but they're reading relevant content online, and that can be a great time to reach them too. The way we do that, or the way that we help our clients do that at Google, is through something called our Google Content Network. And this is the great partnership, tens of thousands of websites on the internet that run ads by Google. And you generally will see that little tagline, ads by Google. In this example, you see once again the John McCain campaign ran an ad, a text-based ad, on the Washington Post, a political page, to try to get their message out. So this is what we call a contextually targeted ad. We didn't know, we had a pretty good idea that the Washington Post was going to run a political story the next day, but we couldn't guarantee it necessarily. But what we could do is place that ad alongside relevant content. The algorithm is literally searching the page for certain keywords and placing relevant ads alongside it. As a piece of persuasion, so message, and I think here is where we have perhaps the tallest mountain to climb, speaking from a purveyor of internet offerings. I think we know that direct response works. You can certainly raise a lot of money off the internet. That's hard to dispute. But can you change minds? Can you affect what people think? Can you persuade them to join your cause? And I think that that's the story that we hope to prove, that we hope to tell at the end of this campaign. You can do persuasion a couple of different ways. One is through our traditional search advertising. So here you see on the right-hand side, T. Boone Pickens, who you've probably been seeing a lot of lately, who is interested in the search query wind power. But what you also see here at the bottom, Mark Udall's campaign, who is also advertising, and this little Colorado tag lets you know that this is being geo-targeted. So if you conduct this same search across the border or back in your home state, you might not see this ad. But here in Colorado, he knows if you're looking for renewable energy or wind power, that's the type of voter, that's the type of person he's looking to reach. And hopefully he'll persuade you to take a look at his website. Another example of persuasion, what you can do as well is contextually target display ads, also on the network. So here's an article about different types of energy, renewable energy, alternative sources of energy, and you see the people from the coal industry are taking this opportunity to put their message in front of you. Now, that other M, mobilization, is another big challenge. How do you get somebody out from in front of their computer screen to go to the polls and to vote? One great example of this that we saw in the primaries, and here you see a quote by David Plouffe, the Obama campaign manager, talking about how they use AdWords to register voters in the state of Texas. So according to Plouffe, they were running ads for users in Texas when they did a search for a caucus location or early voting or registering to vote or where's my voting location. They were able to run an ad at that moment geared towards a voter in Texas, confused, no doubt, about the Texas two-step. And they were able to sign up about 20,000 new voters through this tool. And now you've got a list of 20,000 prime voters who you're pretty sure support you and are interested in voting, and you've got the next 48 hours or however much time is left until the polls open to get them to the polls. Finally, we want all this to be measurable. So we have put into place tools to help you track every dollar that is spent, every conversion, every person that comes to your site that decides to sign up or decides to contribute to your campaign. We have a couple free tools, one of which is Google Analytics. And this is available to everybody. You upload it to your site, and it gives you information on traffic. How many people are coming to your website? Where on the website are they going? Where are they coming from on the internet? Where are they coming geographically? So this is a great tool to use to see how your offline message is performing. If you're running new ads in the state of Pennsylvania or Ohio, you would hope to see a spike in traffic on your website coming from those states. Another tool that is relatively new and we're very excited about is called YouTube Insights. YouTube, which is a Google property, and I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A. This tool allows you to get a better understanding of who's viewing your videos. So if you upload a video to YouTube, you are able to see how many people are watching it, which is public to everybody. But you can see gender breakdown, you can see an age breakdown, and you can see a geographic breakdown. You can also see where they're coming to watch that video. Are they coming through your website? Are they coming from the email you sent around? Are they going through search? Or did they just stumble upon it on YouTube? So this is a new tool. I encourage those of you with your own YouTube channels or who actively upload videos to YouTube to give it a try. And finally, I'll close with another free tool which we encourage you to use, Google Trends. And Google Trends allows you to type in your own search queries, and it gives you a sense of which word or which data point is getting more traffic at any given time. I'm told that this works very well with American Idol. It did a decent job of predicting the presidential primaries. Here I chose to look up Joe Biden, Tim Kaine, and Evan Bayh. And it looks like the Obama campaign made the right choice. Joe Biden was surging there at the end, despite the fact that people did find these mysterious Evan Bayh stickers that did not convince everybody. And you'll be happy to see that in a couple swing states, for instance in Pennsylvania, it was Joe Biden leading the charge. So hopefully that bodes well for this November. So thank you very much. With that, I will turn it back over to Simon.
one point I'd like to make is that we have an affiliate of NDN called the New Politics Institute, which Joe is instrumental in helping us start, which has a URL website, newpolitics.net. And one of the things that you can find on there, Ben, do you have the ability to go online, or is it just, no? What you can do on there is that we've done academic-style papers on 8 new tools that will help you learn in whatever your day job is and whatever kind of advocacy you're doing. These are all free. There's a video in every case. There's also, backing it up, there's also interviews with people like Joe Trippi and the event videos we've done around each of these things. But there are things like Go Mobile, use search, speak in Spanish, and there's a whole bunch of different things on there. A lot of people are using these, so I just want to encourage you. They're all free on our newpolitics.net website. So if you want to stay in touch with us and the work we've been doing around all this new tool space, please go to check out newpolitics.net. So with that, let me open it up to the audience. How are we going to do? Just raise your hand. We got a mic. Please identify yourself. We are recording this, so every moment is, of course, now going into YouTube for all eternity. So be good when you ask your question. Thanks. Anybody?
Hi, Ben Tolchin from Greenberger Research, a polling firm. I had one question based on my experience, but also listening to you, that it seems the web is very good for activating base, 2 million Obama maniacs online. How can the internet evolve to really be more effective with impacting and swaying swing voters?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem is that in a lot of ways that's what the first thing that happened with politics on the web did, which was, if you look through what you want to do, well, money was tantamount in most campaigns, particularly early on. So everybody started to see this as how could you hit the base and get and get it to deliver money. I think so. That sort of drove things at first, particularly, to be honest, about in the Dean campaign, where no one was going to give us a dime. The only place we were going to get any money was to use the internet to do it. The one thing I want to, and then I'll answer the question more directly, but the one thing I wanted to point out is in the Dean campaign, bar none, we did have metrics about what was our best use, return of investment on, and it was on the money front, and that was clearly Google search. I mean, we got more money back through Google search than any other, than email or anything else that we did. It was actually an amazing stat for us. But then going forward, what I was going to say is that, as millions more Americans are spending 14 hours a day on the net, it sort of goes back to what I was talking about early on, where TV is still part of the thing. You can get a lot of negative information from television. The same will be true about the net. But as more Americans can watch a YouTube video, did Will.i.am with 13, 14, 15 million people, did that start to move anybody who wasn't, was sort of thinking about or got their attention? A lot of this is, did something get your attention about Obama so that when you went to his site and saw what was going on and became part of his community or started reading about the issues, that's how you move. So I think you're seeing it. It's just not, is it going to be 50% of the American people tomorrow decide they're going to make a difference because of something they saw on the net? Not yet, but it will get there as more and more, as the network continues to grow, as search works, as more of them, and the tools to help them get what they want, continue to evolve. It's already happening. I just don't think I think watch out for TV impacting this election. As you know, it does, and it's not about a power play. One isn't more powerful than the other. But you have to watch out for it.
If I can just jump on there, I think getting the base excited, getting people who agree with one another excited to agree with one another even more, is a fairly, I think, straightforward thing to do. The trick is to make it as easy as possible to do something about that. So there's an incredible amount of energy out there, like I said at the beginning, of people who want change, and they found each other. They found each other through our website or on their own. And what we are really trying to focus on is the moment when they say, okay, I think we all agreed that things need to change, now what? And then we come in with voter contact tools. We come in with event tools. And I think if you look at something like a robocall versus just a regular person who's calling you, you start to see a very different type of voter contact and a very different type of relationship in politics that our internet program, the technology piece, is just sort of a tool, but it's all about people to people. It's all about the relationships. And I think everybody gets that, no matter if they're the base or a swing voter or what have you.
And then just to put an exclamation point on it, that is the test, I think, of this cycle, which is persuasion. Can you use the internet for persuasion? And we can sit up here and keep quoting all these stats, which are all true. The fact is people are watching a lot of TV, as they always will, but they're also spending a lot of time on the internet. And you could add they're 18 inches away, they're not using TiVo or a DVR, and in many cases you're giving them an ability to interact and engage with that ad. So the challenge that I would put to you and everybody at Greenberg is how can we best make that case? It's hard to poll this, but we have a variety of online research studies we can do. But I think until a big name pollster says, gosh, in this state we ran a certain message just on the internet and it moved numbers, then I think we'll have a much better story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make one fine point on where you can already see it, okay? Peer-to-peer communication is what matters, okay? When it's what I was talking about. If five of your friends saying, check out Barack Obama, is a lot more powerful than a positive ad about Barack Obama. That we know, and I can give you the example. Today, if 5 of your friends you get an email in your box that over the weekend 5 of your friends watched a movie, went to see the big hit movie that was coming out, and they all email you telling you it sucked, it no longer matters how much Sony Pictures pays on television, millions and millions of dollars, telling you it's going to be the greatest movie you ever saw. You're not going. And so what you're already seeing in the Obama campaign, I think, is exactly what we're talking about, where once you get that base ignited and now they have the tools to reach out to people who are, to their friends, family, they're trying to persuade their best friend to come over and help or think about the Obama campaign. You're now into something that's much more powerful than a paid television ad. That'll cut through. A negative ad will not be your best friend or your sister or so I think the power of all of this stuff, again, because still today, as big as it's gotten, as strong as it's gotten, as the tools have developed, I think they're going to, what the case I'm making is they're going to be even more powerful and even bigger and even more Americans, and you're going to see that number go to like 10 hours on television and 19 hours on the net, or you won't be able to tell the difference anymore because so much user-generated content will be out there communicating for their candidate or their cause. And so I just think I still want to make the case that we're kind of still, as amazing as it all is, we're still sort of at the very beginnings of how this is going to affect our democracy, how we govern, and how we elect our candidates.
One quick point is that, if the war room in the future, the war room in '92 was 20 people, right? The war room in this campaign and the war room in future campaigns is going to be 10 million people, 15 million people who are going to be up to speed and fighting it out every day. And that, if you think about it, then, is that 10 to 15 million people, and I don't know how many are in the opt-in Obama email world and who access the Obama world, but they've got 2 million donors. One would assume that the number is a multiple of that are in 6, 7, 8 million people that they're connected to. That 8 million people, if they're asked to send out a viral email to everybody they know, we're talking about hitting 50, 60, 70 million people, right? That's as big as the TV buy, right? And it's more meaningful because it's peer-to-peer, it's one-to-one. And so I think we're getting into a completely different model of how to think about traditional. I mean, your question is a classic question we're all wrestling with, but these people-based campaigns are going to, as Joe said, we have to really reassess what it is to even think about base and swing and so on, because if you're igniting the passion, if you're tapping into the passion of everyday Americans, that's worth a lot more than a television commercial. With 35% household DVR penetration in the United States and 60% of people with DVR skipping all television commercials, we have a situation where in this election, somewhere around 25% to 30% of all voters are going to be skipping all all political spots, right? So the age of the 30-second spot, sort of the end day for the 30-second spot is sort of in the horizon. It's down the line. What we do next and what we're going to look like 4 years from now, given that we didn't even have social networking and YouTube 4 years ago. And do you know that in the last 4 years, the number of households in the United States with broadband access has doubled, right? Doubled in 4 years. So we're going to be up at 70, 80, 90% broadband penetration in people's homes, by the next election. And, that's going to be comparable to, TV penetration. So we really are, you're seeing all the metrics in this stuff is exploding. And I think it's really challenging, frankly, the way we understand how to think about, these old models of campaigns. I know there's a lot of questions, so let me get to it. But that was a great question, Ben. Thank you. Mike, you pick. Just go ahead. You'll go next.
I'm Owen Bird, and along with a couple people in this room, I run the all-volunteer organization Silicon Valley for Obama. My question concerns your opinions about the future evolution of tools to help with distributed campaigning, my new favorite piece of jargon. What we have found is that MIBO and a number of the other existing tools are great and have been enormously helpful, but maybe it's because of where we live and the quality of all the Googlers in our volunteer group, but we've had to design tools that have had abilities that reach well beyond MIBO. We designed something ourselves that helped Obama put 7,000 precinct captains to work across California for Feb 5. So I guess my question is, where do you see the tools going in the next few years to more broadly support distributed campaigning?
I think, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about this, but specifically to the to your organization and organizations like that, I think it's wonderful. It's where the best ideas come from. I think that we, as a campaign, have our own technology, our own timeline, our own sort of balance we have to strike between development and resources and integration and all those pieces that are fairly complicated, but at the end of the day, it's energy. And if somebody's organizing within the campaign or outside of the campaign, it's all focused in one goal. And what we've tried to do is create a space where people who don't know technology probably as well as you and your peers can very easily do a similar type of activity. And as I said earlier, try to lower the barrier to participation. But the larger point is, the best ideas this cycle will probably come from outside of the campaign, and they'll be incorporated into the next iteration of the campaign. And I can't wait to see that happen. Wish it could happen sooner, but I think it's a mutually beneficial situation.
So that's how it was in the Dean campaign. I mean, it was amazing how much of the new ideas for the campaign or the next version of what we were working on came from outside the campaign. I mean, and so you have this ability to, again, lower the barrier wherever you can to have people who don't get the technology but just want to have an easy way to get involved and act on their urge for change or their urge, and frankly, there's something else going on. People have, I think, an urgent want and need for community because that's been so diminished out there. And so that happens at the same time. People who are visionaries or have technical abilities can build stuff that we weren't even thinking of at the time. And so, yeah, that's why the whole thing's going to continue to move and become more powerful. Frankly, half the time a campaign can't do it. I mean, we had Zach Rosen in the campaign, in the Dean campaign, who at the time was trying to create like Dean Space and Dean Link. I mean, and it was a beautiful, gorgeous thing, except the election was going to be over way before he got it done. I mean, because, and so we never got it quite built the way we really would have wanted to. I mean, we just couldn't throw enough bodies at it inside our campaign. Now, after the campaign, he went and worked with a lot of Drupal stuff and did a lot of, really good things out there for nonprofits that couldn't afford to build out their own stuff. And so all I'm trying to say is a lot of times it takes people from outside the campaign who have an idea and a vision and can just build it with blinders on to make something amazing happen.
Peter, you want We'll go back and forth to you guys. Okay.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Rick DeGoli. I'm with Environmental Entrepreneurs. And I've got a question and a comment. I'm with the National Finance Committee for the Obama for America, and we've really been focused on media buys. So the purpose of raising the money is to distribute it to media. My experience is I've been doing a daily email to update people about the convention that goes to about 400 people, and the response that I've gotten from that is exactly along the lines that you guys are commenting on. It's really a surprising response. I mean, people are spreading it around to lots of different people, and it's a very positive, strong response. I had never thought about it in the context of all those media buys, losing 25% of them to DVRs, but it's certainly true. So that's a really interesting thought, and it raises a question for me, which is, in addition to the significant number of states that the campaign is actively competing in right now, both to win and to force the McCain campaign to spend money where we may not win, but we can threaten. There are an enormous number of people that are on the streets, that are registering voters and going door to door, many of whom are volunteers, but many of whom are paid. I mean, in Georgia, there's 125 full-time paid volunteers that are registering voters, and they've got a huge number to meet in terms of the targeted number of voters they're going to register. I think there's more people that are on the street in this campaign than in any campaign in history. So the question is, do you see this money beginning to move from this enormous media buy cost to other avenues that are going to generate, in fact, more democratic action and involvement?
I think Peter is anxious to answer this question, but
I would say we hope so. And when I bump into Macon late night at a variety of parties around town, that's the case I'm making with beverage in hand. Looking at corporate advertising spending, in America, about 5 to 10% of all ad dollars go online. And I think it's getting closer to 10 than it is to 5 right now. And increasingly you're seeing companies come out and say, for instance, some of the big automotive companies are putting a lot more money online than they're putting on television relative to what they used to. With campaigns, in 2004, the stat that I've seen, and I forget the source, one of these guys may know it, 0.8% of political advertising dollars went online. So 0.8 versus where it should be about 5 to 10. Optimistically, I think it'll double or triple, which gets us to about 1.6 or maybe 2.4. I think which would be very optimistic. But I think it's moving the right way, but albeit slowly.
Joe, you go.
Yeah, I mean, look, before 2003, I mean, literally, you'd have trouble inside a campaign getting $3,000 spent to build a website. I mean, they wouldn't do it. I mean, you couldn't get them to do it. I mean, forget about Google Ads or anything. I mean, you'd have to fight inside the campaign and say there's this thing called the internet, it'd be good to have a web page. They might blow a $500 or $1,000 on it. So then 2003 happened, and you at least, like today, one, everybody knows they've got to do it. Two, they all know you can't put a static thing up there and just, like brochure where that they have to, they're understanding the tools. I mean, the Obama campaigns made that even more, more clear. And so, and now I think people are getting a bigger understanding that you can get success with Google Ads and other things that are out there. So yeah, I think it's changing dramatically. And I think again the same thing happened in 2004. We had 100,000 handwritten letters go to undecideds in Iowa using the online community to do it. That was the first. They've done it masterfully better. That's not my point is that return on investment, those 100,000 letters, and you see what the massive outreach that's happening, that you're talking about in Georgia and other places, that's going to have a big impact on this election. So yeah, I think it's clearly moving, maybe not as fast as it should be, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. I unfortunately have to bail.
Joe has to leave, and Joe, you do have to go.
Yeah, I do.
Joe's going to be
sorry.
on. You're going to be on CBS.
I'm live CBS Evening News in about hopefully, if I make it in time, 45, 50
Don't we think if
minutes.
Joe's on that it's going to raise Katie Couric's ratings? Don't we
Oh,
think-
yeah. No, she's wonderful, though. Thank you.
Joe, thank you. We're going to continue, so anybody you'd like to go, but we're going to stay for another 10 or 15 minutes with the rest of the panel. But
Can I
Joe,
make
thank
one
you.
parting thing? Can I make one
Yeah,
parting
go.
point?
Joe,
Look,
a parting comment from Joe
The
Trippi.
one thing I think that, I hear what you say about change, and there's an urgent need for change, and that's what's driving through 2003, 2008 is driving a lot. But the one thing that is clear to me is that, it's something I mentioned earlier, that what's happening is the American people want a sense of community in the country again. They want a sense of being together as one people. And I think that, Neil Abercrombie, congressman from Hawaii, said to me in the middle of the Dean campaign, "Do you understand what you're doing?" And yeah, we're doing this cool, thing, and people are getting involved and making it easy for them. He said, "No, you understand what you're doing? This is about Americans having faith in strangers again." And I went, "Oh, Neil, you're getting," no, it was like, I don't know, man. And then I thought about it. No. And then I thought about it, and he was completely right. That's really, deep down, that's what's happening here. That you can go to the Obama campaign's website, and all the people started out as strangers, but they're all working together, they're trusting each other, there's, when you're talking about your listening parties, I mean, who the hell in America, if you put on every telephone pole a sign, just a paper sign that said, "Hey, my name's Joe Trippi, I live at 1313 Elm Street, come to my house, and let's talk about the future of the country." You don't know me and I don't know you, and just come and we'll pray nothing bad happens, right? Well, they're having these parties all over the place, people are coming, and and I've said this before, what's the amazing thing? The amazing thing is everybody leaves, the host sits back, the jewelry's still in the jewelry box, the silverware's in the fine silverware drawer, and the china's still there. It turns out the American people are good. And, and I think they're doing a great job of proving that. So that's my parting shot for all of you, but I've got to run, sorry. Thank you.
See you, bro. Okay, 2 more questions, but I'm going to answer. I just want to make one comment to the question that was asked about TV, because I think it's important, and I think the Obama campaign has shown us one way to spend the money, which is this amazing grassroots effort that's been highly integrated in with the online enterprise, and I think will continue to be. But just one statistic about TV, because I think it's something that challenges all of us who've come out of the traditional 20th century media world, is that when I graduated from college in 1985, 90% of anybody watching a television in America was watching live broadcast TV, one of the television broadcast networks. Today it's a third. Right? And so it means that at any time one of those boxes are on, only a third of the people watching it are watching those ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. And that is a radical change of the biggest and most powerful media that exists in politics and in the country. And it's something that requires a big conversation, because there's no way, given that if you're doing today what you were doing 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, you clearly are doing it wrong. I mean, it's not a question of not doing it right. It's just a question, it's clearly wrong, because the eyeballs have left. People have changed. And I think to reinforce something that Joe is saying is that people, radio's in decline, newspapers in decline in terms of readership, magazines are in decline. More people are watching TV. Actually, TV viewership is actually up, maybe not in terms of net hours, but in terms of actual eyeballs every week. So part of the challenge we're going to have as we go forward is the whole way that people are consuming information is going through incredible change. And we have to create a culture of experimentation that is trying to reinvent and stay up with the American people as they're going through this rapidity of change. And to Ben's question, part of this is going to require more polling and more market research, frankly. It's good. The biggest winner in all this are the pollsters, frankly. The biggest losers are the media consultants, I think, in the traditional architecture of our system, because it means that you have to know much more about who your customers are to design a media campaign to reach them, because 65-year-old women in Scranton are consuming media radically different than the 22-year-olds we've seen bicycling around Denver the last couple of days, right? And so we have to get smarter about how we sort of anticipate this velocity of change and really begin to build a politics around this, which is why I just want to say that the Obama campaign to me has been so incredibly inspiring and inspirational, because they're anticipating so much of this and have taught us. I think for anyone who's looking for a model, I think we have one. And they've taught all of us, I think, how this is going to get done, and we have to keep helping them, I think. Maybe one or two more. Yes, ma'am. Here. We get a...
I think Simon Craig's back there.
Is there? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, can I just... You'll go next, ma'am, but we have an old friend of NDN's. Craig, welcome.
Craig Newmark. My day job is customer service at a website. That website, depending on strangers trusting each other on a continuing basis. But now that we have this network campaign, which I feel will be successful for President Obama, what do we do with this network to run the government after he's inaugurated in next January? We have some ideas about how that's going to happen, but we need to start planning and getting the word out now.
Craig, maybe you guys can talk a little bit after. And I just want everyone to know that all of our staff is actually staying in apartments rented over Craigslist. So Craig, thank you very much for your contribution to our convention activity. Yes, ma'am, you were next up here, if we can. But you guys should hook up afterwards, Craig.
Hi, I'm Nancy Donaldson. I'm from Duckco Worldwide. It's a consulting group. My question is, are you able to use tools, or do you foresee these tools to measure voter turnout and actual people who vote, who are also among the 2 million and growing? And I say that from perspective of big or small campaigns, from the perspective of how data is analyzed and covered from a media perspective, and then how sentiment is registered with decision makers, if you can, because what matters in this context is people actually voting, and that's a real curiosity to me.
Great.
If I could, we, working with one of the political committees during the primaries, we conducted a study just like that. So using Google AdWords, much as I showed. So someone searching for where they vote in a particular state, how many of those people sign up, and this was a registration drive. So a certain amount of people registered. What they had the luxury of doing after the primary was to go back, look at the voter file, to see how many of the people who registered online actually voted. And the results, which we'll make public after the election, were extraordinary. So far ahead of where a direct mail voter registration campaign had ever been, that it's sort of almost silly to do it any other way. I mean, you want to do all sorts of different things. There are different voters out there. There are different demographics. But it was one of the first examples that I've seen of that, of actually seeing a newly registered voter who registered online via an ad and have them actually turn out on Tuesday.
And I think along those lines, we learned a lot in the primary, looking at online advertising, how it related to turnout in various caucuses and primaries. But your question sort of gives me an opportunity to come back to something that we discussed earlier that I think is relevant. When we started talking about the sort of peer-to-peer organizing and phone calls, I think we went down a path which is important, but this notion of sort of message, like pushing out a certain message, and this idea of like a war room and the virtual war room and how it's a fight. And I think this is sort of accepts a premise that we have a finite amount of voting population, or sort of approximately the same, and it's just a question of who we can get more people to believe. Instead of expanding the universe. And I think that this weekend we're doing the Vote for Change program, which is all about voter registration, and it's all about the peer-to-peer organizing. People having events, getting out and walking around their neighborhoods with voter reg forms and just signing them up. And we keep track of that data. We know how successful in what areas this is being really taken seriously, and we can, I think, it informs our larger strategy in that sense. And there's certainly also a turnout model to the peer-to-peer. You know, you'll get a phone call before the election. I think most people here probably will. I mean, I think the idea is that we can not just sort of track data, but change the landscape by taking advantage of these people that really want to do something to support the campaign.
Yes. Who is next? Peter, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Martin Klingst. I'm working for the German weekly Die Zeit. I have a question. You emphasized very much, you know, the advantages for democracy. I see them too, but I also see a big disadvantage. And you can also see that when you follow this campaign, that nothing is private anymore. And when you look at the Obama saying, you know, that people in their misery cling to gun and religion, that wasn't a private fundraising event, and suddenly it was in the internet and went to different communities and was spread out, and you never can catch it. And I think, you know, there is a big disadvantage, because as a politician you become less authentic, and you are becoming very cautious and don't speak anything off the record anymore. So I also see a big disadvantage in the whole internet communities.
I think that's a valid point. I think, you know, having worked on campaigns, you know, you used to trail your opponent to events, and maybe you get a tape recorder in there. Now you have a video camera, and it's on YouTube almost by the end of the event or during the event. Overall, though, we think that the global we at Google believe that transparency is good, and that it will only further the discourse for people to understand more fully what people are saying, be able to find it. If I could plug a new tool on YouTube, you can now search video for keywords. So if you're looking for the word healthcare or Iraq or macaca, you can search videos, and it will actually show you exactly at the right point in that video where that word is. And so again, we think that this will encourage citizens to pay attention, to listen to what their leaders are saying.
So that's searching audio?
That is searching audio on video.
I think in terms of the discourse, you know, the technology has certainly changed some of the areas that you're talking about in terms of people being on the record, off the record, that sort of thing. But I think one of the larger implications is how many new people it's brought into the discourse and how easy it's made anyone to say something. And I think if you ask a lot of the bloggers who are here about moments when somebody's just said something that made sense and it got picked up by the media, it got picked up and it made even more sense and so forth, that's changing the way we're talking about news and talking about our democracy. So it's not just a negative thing, it's just it's a larger, more powerful medium now.
Yeah, and just one quick comment is that I think what it's going to do is that it's going to advantage candidates and public officials who mean what they say and say what they mean. I think that candidates who appear political and who are saying one thing and doing another, I think will be disadvantaged in this YouTube era where, you know, if they are saying one thing to one audience and one to another, they can get caught at that. Or if they, like John McCain has repeatedly and serially over the last several years, changed his positions on virtually everything that mattered to him, you know, we actually have documented video of that can be used, and eventually the networks will actually start to do that in the United States, I think. But the thing is that it makes it much harder now, I think, to be political and inauthentic, and I would argue that it's one of the reasons, I think that that's part of what hurt Hillary in the primaries a little bit, is that she was seen as being a little bit too political in the way that she talked, and whereas Obama, I think, came off as more authentic and real, and you could touch him and you understood what he was about. And so I think it will change the type of leadership. I mean, I think it will have an impact on what kind of leaders emerge. I think this is a good thing. I mean, I think it's creating transparency and openness that's good for the system. And just to echo what was said by Macon is that, what we have to recognize is that citizens are just much more informed now than they used to be about everything. I mean, I used to do conference calls with my donors about congressional races and Senate races, and I always had more knowledge of these races and things than any of my donors. And now, inevitably, in every call, I'm taught by my own community because they're so wired in. My dad is given to weird races, obscure races in Alaska, right, that he never would have in a million years ever known about before. And here he is, a 75-year-old, 76-year-old man, and his knowledge of what's going on in American politics is much deeper today than it was even 5 years ago because of the blogs and because it's just much easier for average citizens to get in touch with the discourse of the country. This is a good thing. This is a healthy thing for us, and I think it's exciting. Let's do one more, and then we'll let our very busy Obama man go. Nobody?
Good afternoon. My name is Celeste Morris. I have a political consulting firm, Morris Allsop. I'm very interested in live broadcasts, using them for maybe town hall meetings or issue forums and things like that, but be interactive. And I just wanted to have your comments about how you see it working, has it worked, and what really are some of the best technologies to use for that. And another comment just about the senior citizens, because I think a lot of people think that older people are not tapped into this when they actually have the most time to be online, and I don't even think we've tapped into how really to reach senior citizens who are our greatest voters by using a lot of technology. So maybe a comment on that also.
Well, streaming-wise, we're already streaming a lot of events. We have videographers who travel with Barack all the time, and to the degree it's available, internet's available at these sites, and dependable connection. We try to stream a lot of the town halls that are already happening, and I know that's not exactly what you had in mind there, but certainly gives a window into the campaign and has been very interesting in terms of driving traffic and bringing new visitors sort of closer to Barack himself and seeing him out there. In terms of the interactive town halls, we've actually done that as well. Women for Obama is a group, a constituency group within the campaign, and their Minnesota chapter, I think actually, the state group, did a live stream with some policy experts about women's issues. And what was very interesting, getting back to some of the themes of this discussion, is that they organized house parties, 5 or 10 across the state, to get together to watch this and participate and ask questions. So they sort of had this multi-pod thing that was going on. And that's the larger point. To me, I get concerned when we create venues that are premised on access to internet, because that's still very much an issue in this country. So the idea of blending offline parties with technology that allow these parties to be a little bit more interesting and interactive to people, I think is where the most productive use of streaming, particularly the town halls, is. I don't know if you have any extra thoughts about that.
I would say I think YouTube, this election cycle, has done a great job of opening up the process. We co-hosted with CNN 2 of the presidential primaries, where we allowed users to upload where we allowed users to upload their own questions, and then they would play the question, and then each candidate would answer it. We've now taken that a little further, where there are virtual debates occurring. So I believe we just did one, the governor's race out west, where users would submit questions. You can watch the user's question, and then the Democratic candidate gives an answer, then the Republican candidate gives an answer. And then you scroll further down, you pick the next person, they ask the next question. So again, I think it's helping to engage and include more people in a very clever way. The best one I've seen, though, is the Prime Minister of England has a terrific YouTube channel. And you know, of course, questions is a big tradition in the British parliamentary system, and they get down there and everybody yells at them, and here, 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 they're screaming answers and questions at each other. This is an even more interesting way to let citizens, not just members of parliament, ask questions to their leader. So hopefully someone asks a question. Craig, you asked a question, what will President Obama take into the White House? So we hope that he will do the same thing, and he'll take questions from us once he's in the White House.
Yeah, David Cameron also, I would say the Conservative Party leader in Britain, is using video almost in probably the most innovative way that I've seen of any global political leader right now. And if you haven't had a chance to go check out, if you're interested in this stuff, I mean, go check out David Cameron's site in the Conservative Party in Britain. It's pretty remarkable. And it shows that this is not, even though in the U.S. right now this is very left-leaning, and the Republicans have been very slow, there's no reason that these are tools. There's no reason this has an ideological bent to it, I think, and that the Republicans will, eventually start to catch up. It is astonishing, though, how far, behind they are. And Craig, I think that this is the final, and I'll close with this, and we'll mill around a little bit, is that there's no question that if Senator Obama can get 10, 15, 20 million committed partners in this election, that their personal connection to him and their excitement for having changed America and beaten John McCain in the election will translate into a governing force and an advocacy community for his agenda that we'll have never seen before. And I think the opportunities for that, having been part of the Clinton 92, 93, 94 experience, where when we came in, we were hard charging and we got mowed down pretty hard. And I actually tried to create a community to support the president's agenda. We were using 800 numbers then. This was pre-internet. And it is true that in 1993, I and a couple other people were the first, we put the first political party online. We got the DNC on CompuServe in 1993. And my assistant went to the training, and typical of what happened, right, all the comments we got were from right-wingers just kicking the crap out of us every day. So it scared everybody at the DNC in 1993. But I think the opportunities for governing, for citizen involvement in the next presidency is going to be unprecedented. Maybe, Craig, we can work with you to sort of start convening more conversations about that in the months to come. I want to thank our two panelists and Joe Trippi in absentia. I know how busy you are, Megan, so thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.